God help me, I recently watched all of The Amazing Digital Circus, and I say God help me less so because of the show itself, and more so the situation surrounding it. Yeah, The Amazing Digital Circus is a animation from Glitch Productions, written and created by the animator Gooseworks. And as a former animator myself, I'm always kind of interested about what's happening in the industry, and specifically when a project can exist outside the murderous grind machine that is the animation industry as a whole. Seriously, I know so many friends who have struggled in animation, who have been let go from jobs, and who are just constantly Tarzan swinging their way from position to position because the industry itself is just that unstable. And so I'm always going to be rooting for an outside project to succeed, which is a part of what led me to watching this show. I had also heard it compared to both Reboot and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which, if you're unaware, is a horrifying science fiction novella about a group of people who are endlessly tortured by an insane machine ad infinitum till the end of time. So I thought it sounded fun. This has also been one of those things that people have messaged me asking my opinion on near constantly, so here it is. Here is my Amazing Digital Circus hot take. I liked it. That's right. I can be fucking brave and say that I liked The Amazing Digital Circus. Those 52 million people who have watched the finale are cowards. I'm the only one willing to openly and publicly admit that I think this was a good show. So what I like about it? Well, honestly, a lot of things. A huge part of it was just the general look and aesthetic. This really reminded me of a bunch of like weird old children's shows that I watched when I was little, although those shows were generally done with like puppets and shit. I kind of just enjoyed how much it kind of captured that feel, and especially the idea that these characters are all trapped in this like weird liminal environment, kind of having to do just whatever the whims of Kane dictate they do. I would also say though, I just really appreciated the animation, and particularly that of Pomni. I think the weird physical comedy they get out of her, and like how her voice acting informs her animation, and the weird like facial expressions she makes, and all like the contortions of her body, it's just really strange and fun. And even though like I didn't really relate to that character too much in terms of her personality, I was always excited to see her on screen because I just felt the way they move her around is really fun. And I'd say like the same of a lot of characters. Jax in particular, like they will sometimes just go full Bugs Bunny mode with him and really push like his expressions and build. It looks like they're building like custom rigs and models for specific poses he hits, and things like that are always just going to speak to me because it speaks to just how much the animators behind it are putting into this production. And what I'd say like of the cast in general is one thing I really enjoy about them is they all have like dynamics between each other. One of my least favorite things that can happen when you have like an ensemble cast like this is when you have like the main character, and the main character has a relationship with each member of the supporting cast, but the supporting cast members don't really feel like they have relationships to each other. And this is another thing that I really genuinely enjoyed about Digital Circus. It feels like everyone has their shit. Each one of the cast members has like a history and baggage and a relationship. Some cast members like other cast members more than they do other cast members. And I think like watching it through and getting to see how the different characters relate and their different strengths and weaknesses, it was actually some surprisingly strong character writing in a way that like I really was not expecting when I first started watching the show. And particularly in those moments where the show kind of slows down and you just get to see like a little vignette between two characters. One of my absolute favorite bits is from episode, I think it's 3, and you get to see Kinger in the basement of the haunted house, and basically Kinger is this chessboard character, and whenever he's in darkness, he sort of stops being insane and starts kind of returning to who he was, and you start to find out like, oh, what this guy's deal is, like what tragedies he's been through, and kind of just the hardships of living in this weird abstract reality. And it was really genuinely compelling. Another moment that really stood out to me and really got me invested in the series is from episode 2. Basically, the way the show works is Kane is creating weird, like, video game-esque adventures that the cast of the Digital Circus have to go on, whether they kind of like it or not. And in one of these games, Pomni encounters this weird crocodile dude called Gummy Goo, and they kind of get in this accident. Even though, like, he's a bad guy and she's sort of a good guy, they end up, like, tumbling into this weird abstract nether space, and it's like this out of bounds area for this weird fake video game that they're both trapped in. And that is where Gummy Goo realizes that he is an NPC. He's not a real person. And you actually see him encounter, like, his own character model, and he has to, like, come to terms with the fact that his memories are all fake, his mother isn't real, and that he only exists in this very specific way. And that was really the moment that I started to give a shit. You know, I was like, okay, I'm enjoying this. This isn't, like, just kind of complete nonsense. This is not the kind of a Tumblr slop I feel a lot of people on the internet kind of like to frame it as. There's actually mechanics and things going on beneath the surface here. So yeah, I kept watching and I kept enjoying it. Now, that isn't to say I think this is a perfect show or anything like that. I think it definitely has its problems, and one of the biggest ones for me is just some of the characters are nowhere near as developed as the other. By the time you get to the end of the Digital Circus, it is very much the Pomni and Jax show. Characters like Ragatha specifically feel like really, I would say, it's not necessarily that they're underdeveloped. I think it's just a lot of their characterization gets left out. Ragatha is this character who is meant to feel like very insecure, very isolated from the rest of the crew. I think the main way that you sort of experience that is other people talking about it. You know, people will talk about how they don't like to be around Ragatha. She'll talk about how, like, you know, she doesn't really feel like anyone likes her. But it's very rare, I think, there's a scene where you actually get to see that take effect and get to see the effect it has on her. And I would say by the end of the show, that doesn't really get much better. And I was really kind of left wanting with, like, okay, what was Ragatha's deal? It felt like she never really kind of got her moment. And I would say, like, Zoobles or Gangle didn't feel that way. Zooble or Gangles felt like actually, you know, properly. God, I'm terrified now that character isn't called Zoobles. One moment, it was Zoobles. I was right. You've got fucking nothing comments. Kinger is creating weird, like, video game-esque adventures, and then there's other moments that, like, feel like they are nearly hitting on something great, but, like, don't quite get there. Like, Gangle's scene at the end of episode maybe 5, it's the fast food episode. She gets very frustrated and does something, and, like, it's a beautiful scene. It's really well done, but I was a little bit like, why did she do that? And then later on, the characters kind of talk about why she did it, and it just didn't quite click with me. I think part of the problem there is that this is an independent animation, which means that, like, there is very limited resources to actually make this, and you have to be really economical with how you use your storytelling. And I experienced a lot of this doing, like, the Eyepatch Wolves comic, where sometimes, like, you have an idea for a character or section, and then it's like, oh wait, we have a quarter of a chapter to pull this off. I think we need to cut this helicopter bank robbery scene. And so my feeling is that, you know, for as lavish as the production of Digital Circus is, I'm guessing there were times where tough calls had to be made and scenes had to get cut, and that's why you get this slightly incomplete feeling with a lot of the characters. Another aspect of the show I didn't always love is sometimes when the characters are talking about their emotions, it gets very, like, after school specially. The characters aren't actually talking about, like, the plot or themselves. They're actually just explaining the concept. So it's like, well, you know, when someone hurts you, you have to try and see the best in them and acknowledge that it happened and moved on. And, like, it's really, I would like to see them explore those dynamics through their kind of conversations and actions. But sometimes, especially later on, it kind of felt like the story just, like, stopped, and the characters would, like, turn to the camera and be like, here's what this scene's about. And I just didn't need that because I thought the character writing was kind of strong enough to carry it anyway. But that said, though, I do wonder if those sections are why the show has had such success with, like, a very young audience, because it, for the most part, spells out its themes, spells out its relationships, spells out, like, the kind of interactions it's trying to have. And I think there's a kind of audience that appreciates that. I'm not super one of them, but, like, I get it. yeah, that might be a contributing factor in how hard this show has resonated with people, because holy fucking shit has it resonated. You might see a lot of negativity about the Amazing Digital Circus online. You might see people say that it's fucking cringe or like they hate it or whatever. And the only reason that is because the fandom behind it is so massive. At the time of recording this, the finale has barely been up for a week and it already has 50 million views. And I swear to God, you could time this shit like clockwork. You can see this coming every time, right? Internet thing blows up, fandom gets huge, people immediately start talking about how garbage the fandom is and how they're problematic and how there's a bunch of bullying and a bunch of crazy, perverted, weird shit. And I'm not even talking about Amazing Digital Circus. That is literally any fandom on the internet that hits a certain level of popularity. And it's always kind of frustrated me a little bit because I feel like so often enthusiasm and fandom are so vilified online, despite the fact that if you're on the internet, if you're watching this video, there is a very high chance that you are part of some fandom, some online enthusiast group. And I feel like it's this weird self-flagellating thing where we just feel a need to look at other fandoms and be like, that's fucking garbage. I hate that. This is awful. But Overwatch is pretty good. You know, it's not specifically Overwatch. It's just what we do. And oh my God, the outrage around the Amazing Digital Circus has been fucking wild. And now granted, like a lot of this extends to stuff kind of before or beyond the show itself. The creator Gooseworks has like gotten a lot of attention. People saying that like she's very problematic and she said a bunch of shitty things in the past, or in general just like isn't a nice or good person. And I've actually looked into like a fair amount of this. Now granted, there absolutely could be stuff I'm missing, but what I will say is I definitely found some posts that I kind of like looked sideways at and I was like, really? What do you mean by that? Like, why would you post that? There was specifically one where I believe she said something about, does anyone make really dark or edgy jokes when they're alone with their closest friends? I don't fucking know. And yeah, I could kind of see how someone would look at a post like that and be like, wait, what kind of jokes are we like, what do you consider is like safe to joke about? So like, I do get it to a degree, but I gotta say, like, when I look at a creator and when I'm trying to assess, like, okay, is this person a decent person or is this person likely to spread harm online? A lot of the time I'm looking at like, okay, what are the patterns? Have they consistently like shown shitty behavior and not made an attempt to make up with it? Or have they been very clear like, hey, this is the kind of fandom I'm trying to cultivate. This is what I'm okay with. This is what I'm not okay with. And I don't want my fandoms to be this kind of thing. Like at this point, I would hope that if you watch my shit, you would know that I don't want you to be a fucking weird racist or homophobic or transphobic or any of that shit. And Gooseworks has said similar shit online. So for the most part, while like I'm not gonna tell anyone, hey, you shouldn't have a problem with this creator, because I just don't think that's my place. For the most part, I've gone through their shit and it seems like fairly inane stuff in the grand scheme of things. And again, if someone has looked at their shit and found stuff they have a serious issue with, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm only telling you the conclusion that kind of I've reached. And granted, I could be wrong and there could be shit that I've missed. But I do worry that a little bit surrounding Gooseworks does lead to this kind of thing where whenever I feel like a female hits any kind of like threshold of power in the creative industry, immediately there is this spotlight on them and it becomes this whole other fucking thing. And again, not saying that's what it is with Gooseworks, but I just wonder. Because it definitely feels like some of the criticism isn't coming from a good place and it's coming from the exact kind of people online who will just vilify a woman for succeeding. There was another post she made that got a lot of controversy that was basically when the Digital Circus movie was leaked, she pretty much said that she doesn't care. And that provoked a huge backlash online. And look, I gotta say, I kind of get it. Like, when I spend 3 months working on a YouTube video and I'm just so fucking sick of talking about it and like reading about it and thinking about it and writing about it and editing it and re-editing it and rewatching different sections of the video, it's exhausting. And then like, you know, when I see a comment and it's immediately like, I noticed there was an apostrophe missing from this word. It's like, you motherfucker. Like, I get it. Not that people don't have a right to criticize shit or make that comment or get upset about stuff, But I understand finishing a big project and then kind of being like, okay, and now I'm done. And to me, that's all that post was really about. And I think that, people are people, and they don't want to infinitely work on things forever. And there's a point where they just kind of want to walk away from a project. And I absolutely understand how someone could be in that position. The most recent reason people are mad, though, is actually to do with the conclusion of Digital Circus, and in particular, how the Digital Circus movie, which is like the finale to the whole thing, ends. Now, I'm going to go into spoilers here, but I'm going to keep it pretty brief and pretty tight. But what I will say is, if you do want a full, in-depth discussion of my feelings on Digital Circus, it's actually going to be on the very next episode of the Versus Wolves podcast, in which me and Wooly Versus will be talking about the amazing Digital Circus and also the Bible for some reason. So yeah, I mentioned earlier in the video that Jax is kind of the secondary main character to Pomni, and we learn in the film that Jax has actually been dealing with all this crazy gender issues, and I would say that the reveal of what's really going on with Jax and the flashback with Ribbit and how their friendship falls apart, that to me was one of the best things Digital Circus has done the entire time. And specifically, there is a moment when Ribbit takes a little ribbon, it looks like a little bow tie on her, but she takes it and puts it on Jax's head, and I loved that moment. I thought that was a really beautiful just instance of like a visual storytelling, and I really thought it worked, and it said so much about Jax and their self-loathing and all the kind of horrible shit they've done over the course of the circus and what that means. But the problem is that Jax doesn't really get like a redemption necessarily. The ending of their story is quite grim, and I actually like how it ends. I feel like you could kind of read Jax as this thing where someone fails to become better than their circumstances, although I think that's also like a really harsh and difficult way to kind of look at this scenario. And in particular, I think if people are like relating to Jax on a gender level, maybe you want to see a character who does actually push through their own shit, who does find happiness, and who does kind of like become happy in themselves, and Jax is not that character. And so like I can't really blame someone for having an issue with it. There's also, I feel like, a kind of problem afterwards, and this goes beyond Jax, but towards the end of the entire movie, you start to realize that every character in the Amazing Digital Circus is like brain data of all these people who exist in real life. But those real life people are still alive and living their best life. And you kind of come to learn that they all kind of hang out in this one bar and they all know each other. And for me personally, it just didn't work. It was just a little too Tumblr fan fiction alternate universe for me. And I think just seeing the real life actors and like who they're kind of meant to be, it just didn't click, because what I never came to this show for was an explanation. I wanted to go on this journey for with these characters, but I didn't need to find out like, oh, and here's what the Digital Circus is. And I think taking it into reality, taking it beyond animation, to me it all just felt a little corny and a little meaningless. And in terms of Jax specifically, it really kind of muddies the water about what they were trying to say about this character. And again, personally, I thought the moments that really focused on Jax from the movie were some of the strongest of the entire series, but people are absolutely tearing each other apart over different interpretations of Jax, of what Jax is and what they represent. Personally, to me, it's a pretty cut and dry trans allegory, and I know some people will not agree with that, but that was absolutely the read I took from it. And so yeah, that's why people are going insane over Digital Circus right now. Personally, I just kind of saw an animated show that I thought was pretty cool, and those are my thoughts on it. Okay, till next time.